Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The climax of the book of Exodus, the Creator God came to dwell with his people. You can't approach the holiness of God however you want. Jesus understood this when he says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Friends of Israel, bringing biblical truth about Israel and the Messiah. Saturdays, 2 p.m. Central on AFR. This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Heaton.
Black Check 3, can you return to base? Black Check 3, proceed directly to Glebe. I need you to land. Black Check 3, proceed. Right. Fairfax 1, I need you to land immediately. Fairfax 1, understand, land immediately. Looking for a field.
67 people are feared dead. District of Columbia Fire and Emergency Medical Services Chief John Donnelly says he doesn't expect there to be any survivors from last night's crash. Mike Emanuel has the latest from Alexandria, Virginia, along the river where the Army Black Hawk helicopter and American Eagle jet crashed.
It is eerily quiet. The devastating news, of course, is that this has shifted from a rescue operation to a recovery mission. What's striking is the newly sworn-in Transportation Secretary saying what was happening around Reagan National was not that unusual.
We see military helicopters fly up and down the river. It's a standard path that they fly. They're used to aircraft landing at DCA, and there's a procedure in place because this happens every day. Something went wrong here.
Clearly something went terribly wrong, leading to this devastating loss of life, but Duffy says the two aircraft were in contact with the control tower.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the helicopter was conducting a training flight.
We do know on our side who was involved. It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles. We anticipate that the investigation will quickly be able to determine whether the aircraft was in the corridor and at the right altitude at the time of the incident.
President Trump's nominee for FBI Director, Kash Patel, facing questioning from senators now. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa discussed his support for Patel's nomination.
The public is irritated because the FBI has been used as a political instrument for the Biden administration and getting rid of the political weaponization. And Patel has a record of fighting crime. He's a law enforcement person.
Other hearings taking place this week. Tulsi Gabbard for National Intelligence Director. Critics have called these nominees dangerous and unqualified, but counselor to the president, Alina Habba, says the nominees will bring much-needed change to Washington.
They're disruptors in a good way. They're going to fix this country. We've already seen so much action from President Trump, and they are right in line with his America First policies.
Attorneys general are pressuring Costco to drop its DEI policies. Chris Woodward has more.
Approximately 19 attorneys general are part of the pressure campaign. The coalition sent a letter to Costco this week telling it to either cease its DEI activities or explain how they are not violating civil rights law. Will Hild of Consumers Research applauds the effort.
This whole controversy started a few weeks ago when a conservative activist group put a shareholder proposal before that board asking them to do a report on the dangers, the legal liabilities that they're incurring with their DEI program. And Costco has one of the most strident DEI programs in terms of how it describes what they're doing, race and sex-based quotas for hiring at that company. And the company, instead of backing down, and now that they've been caught, kind of been pointed out that they're breaking the law, they doubled down and said, no, we're not going to change anything. And they seem to be colluding with Al Sharpton and his merry band of race hustlers to actually push the company more in that direction.
Pointing to the letter from attorneys general, Hild says this is exactly what you'd hope attorneys general would be doing in terms of enforcing the civil rights of their citizens and combating discrimination.
And finally, a disappointing reading on economic growth for the holiday quarter.
The economy expanded at a slower than expected pace at the end of last year, though Americans continued to spend. The gross domestic product rose 2.3% in the fourth quarter. Economists were anticipating a 2.5% increase. Even though that number was weaker than forecast, consumer spending rose 4.2% in the quarter. There were fewer people filing for unemployment benefits last week. New claims declined by 16,000 to 207,000. Ginny Cosola, Fox News.
More news online at afn.net and the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty P.
When Psalm 94 was written, God's people faced evildoers who killed even widows and orphans. Yet the psalmist wrote, "When my anxious thoughts multiply within me, your consolations delight my soul." Remembering who the Lord is often comforts troubled hearts. We can find great comfort in His past kindnesses, in Sunday's sermon, in good counsel, and in Scripture. For more encouragement, read Calming an Anxious Heart on thestand.net.
Welcome to today's issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildmon today. I am joined in studio by Fred Jackson. Good morning to you, Fred.
Good morning, Ed.
And Chris Woodward. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Folks, we will have Dr. Alex McFarland, co-host of Exploring the Word, on at the bottom of the hour. After we come back from our break, we'll be talking about some of the news of the day with Alex, always a fan favorite, a listener favorite, I guess I should say. Well, it is January 30th. Guys, it's hard to believe that we are today and tomorrow, and we're done with January.
Yeah, I know.
Crumple it up, throw it in the garbage can. I guess it's because things have happened at a breakneck speed this month.
Yes.
And really accelerated with the inauguration of President Trump. But the politics, the disasters that have gone on this month, we're talking about the wildfires that happened in California that absorbed a lot of attention, as well as the political things that have been happening. And so we are going to start the show with yet another disaster. And Chris, what happened, I guess, overnight?
Yeah, you can read this on our website, afn.net. An American Airlines regional jet with approximately 60 passengers and 4 crew members aboard collided with an Army helicopter while landing at Ronald Reagan National Airport near Washington, D.C. As of this morning, first responders had recovered the bodies of around 27 passengers from the American Airlines jet that was inbound from Wichita, Kansas. A lot of people are still talking about this, and understandably so. At any moment now, we expect to have some sort of announcement or national address from President Trump himself. That was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. Central. It's now past that. But at some point, the new president will come out and speak to this issue.
By the way, before we get into some of the details of what transpired, I do want you to, you mentioned American Family News. I do want you to let our listeners know about American Family News. They can go there to read the story we have up there now. But
yes.
I also want our listeners, if they don't know, to get locked into American Family News. Lots of great content, up to date, and from a Christian perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. AFN.net is the website for American Family News. The cool thing about AFN is that we are a radio and a print news outlet. So you can hear us at the top of every hour on AFR and about 100 and some odd other stations that also air our news. But you can find our print coverage on AFN.net. That's where much of what you hear on the radio winds up as a print article. And it's not just what you hear on the radio at the top of every hour. We've got all kinds of content. So, for example, this story about the American Airlines crash is in the latest AP headline section. We have a lot of AP material. We have videos. We have columns, even a political cartoon, and a latest from the web section where Rusty Pugh and some others on staff here put various things that are getting a lot of clicks on the internet. The idea being, if you go to afn.net, you get a one-stop shop to get all the news and information to keep you and yours informed.
And again, we stress, Fred, this is from a Christian perspective. In fact, we go through the Associated Press stories.
Yes.
And sometimes change some of the headlines because AP is not always unbiased.
No, AP, I would say, is one of the leaders in left-wing bias.
Yeah.
Fortunately, We signed an AP contract many, many years ago, which still allowed us to edit their content, and they're extremely biased.
Yeah.
I mean, they are pro-abortion. They are very much in the Democrat Party camp.
Yes.
And they do not like Donald Trump, and that's probably an understatement.
Yeah.
And Trump supporters. So that's why. However, they are the biggest news gathering agency in the world.
Right.
And they are very good when it comes to giving us the latest on hurricanes and tornadoes and all of that sort of thing. I do applaud them for their coverage of those kinds of stories. Yeah. But as I say, we have the right to edit their political stories. Very often what happens with the Associated Press is they'll put the liberal angle up top, and then they'll quote the conservatives at the bottom. And basically what we do is flip that.
Yeah.
So that you get what the conservative is saying about the issue, and then we will quote whatever member of the Democratic Party is there, and this is their take on. What we do believe in is that you have the complete story of what people are saying on the given issues.
Sides.
Both sides, so that you understand. I think it's very important for people to know what the left is saying.
Yes.
And their take on things, and to quote those people on the left, so there can be no argument that, well, you're misinterpreting.
Right.
We like to put everything in context.
And it's always important to understand the reasoning behind what those on the left are saying.
Sure.
If you want to have a conversation with someone who's on the left, you've got to understand where they're coming from.
That's right.
And you should have already thought through what your response would be from a Christian perspective.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, before we go back to the story at D.C.'s Reagan Airport, how do people get to where they can get American Family News?
Yeah, afn.net is the web address. And if you're there and you've not already taken advantage of this, go to afn.net, click on the subscribe button in the top right portion of the page, enter your email address, which we're not going to share or sell. And once a day, usually mid-afternoon, you're going to get a compilation of stories from a Christian perspective to once again let you know what's going on in your nation and the world.
All right. Well, let's get back to the story and unpack it a little bit, Chris.
Right.
You've been following this, and so is the rest of the AFN news team.
Unfortunately, no survivors have been reported. So this looks like everybody pretty much involved here has perished. And so certainly we need to be praying for the families and friends of the people on board the plane, but also military service members, first responders, even federal and state local officials that are having to work this crash site today. We've got some audio here to help kind of go with our coverage. I don't know necessarily how much we're going to make out of this, but I do have some audio from the air traffic control at the time of this accident. Let's begin there with clip one, please.
American 4782 by Bath, not for individual.
American 472, Star 1 Star 32017.
Did you see that?
American 472. American 3130, go around, turn left end 250, climb maintain 3000.
Okay, left end 350, 3000, American 3130. American 4782 by Bath, not for individual.
All right, I can't make out what's happening. That is the exchange from air traffic control in the lead up to the accident.
Anybody who's flown into Reagan's a very busy airport.
Right.
And from what we saw, there were cameras that actually caught this midair collision. And here's what we know at this point. The American Airlines flight, it was a regional jet, Bombardier 7 version, CRJ-7 they call it, coming in from Wichita, Kansas. It was just about 300 feet off the ground, so very close to landing there at Reagan from Wichita. What we know, there was a Black Hawk helicopter that was in the area, military helicopter, doing some training. And what we know at this point, this helicopter was at about the same level of altitude. What we heard in one of the exchanges, air traffic control tries to speak to the helicopter to say, get in behind that regional jet. And we don't get a response from the pilots aboard the military helicopter. So it's believed they never got that transmission, or they were busy doing something else. there was a pilot, a military pilot with experience this morning, asked the question, okay, you've got a plane at approximately the same altitude you are. The weather was not a factor. The weather was good.
Right.
All right. So the question is, why couldn't they see this regional jet? And one piece of speculation is perhaps the military pilots aboard this helicopter had night goggles on, which would have an incredible impact on their periphery vision. In other words, they couldn't see. One of the other things that's been mentioned, at that altitude, just 300 feet above the ground, all around Reagan Airport, there are lights.
Right.
Building lights, all kinds of traffic lights and that sort of thing. So at that level, you may not have seen the anti-collision lights aboard the aircraft. So obviously there's going to be a big investigation about this. What we do know is that the military pilots were very experienced.
Yeah.
So we're not talking rookies here.
Right.
The three men aboard that military helicopter. It is a very tragic event. I am doubting very much there was negligence necessarily. Perhaps it was a combination of factors that nobody could put together. Some people have said, well, wait a minute, these regional jets, like the big jets, have anti-collision systems, warnings.
Yeah.
That, there's aircraft. But those anti-collision devices shut down when they get below a certain altitude. Because when you get near an airport and you've got an anti-collision system that's blaring at you,
right,
that's very distracting. So they built them so that those anti-collision systems shut down, so that you're not getting all kinds of targets on your radar.
I see.
So it decomplicates the pilot whose full attention is on landing that aircraft. So again, it can be a combination of a bunch of factors which would have led to this horrible tragedy.
And I was looking. Of course, a lot of folks probably know that this happened. We're looking at news stories. There were members, Chris, of the U.S. figure skating team.
Yes.
I was looking at a story on Fox that indicates that one of the figure skaters was barred from the flight because his dog was too large to go on. So he's talking. He would have been on that flight, and so this little dust up saved his life. But the other members of his figure skating team were on it, and as Fred said, nobody survived.
Yeah, terrible situation there. It made me think of some of the 9/11 stories. Years after 9/11, 4 years after 9/11, we heard stories about how people were supposed to be on the flights that crashed into the buildings. There's even like famous stories about actor Mark Wahlberg, who was supposed to be on one of the flights, and for whatever reason he wasn't. I thought of him when I came across the story about the figure skaters. And, it's not uncommon historically for athletes or maybe even teams to perish in flights. You had the Marshall crash back in the 70s, I think it was, well before my time.
College
Marshall football team. Yes. And so, terrible situation, one that you never think about. And, I would understand people that would be scared to fly today. I mean, right. Reagan is supposed to be opening back up today. It's a huge airport. I've flown into it several times. A lot of unease going on here. The head of American Airlines, the CEO by the name of Robert Isom, if I pronounced his name correctly, did issue some statements expressing his sorrow and his thoughts with the families of the victims here. Clip 2.
I want to express my sincere condolences for the accident that happened at DCA last night. We're absolutely heartbroken for the family and loved ones of the passengers and crew members, and also for those that were on the military aircraft. Our focus right now is doing everything that we can to support all of those involved and also the PSA Airlines team. This is devastating. We are all hurting incredibly. We urge any family and friends looking for information about their loved ones to call our designated helpline, and that's at 1-800-679-8215, 1-800-679-8215. Here's
Just for a point of clarification, he said it was a PSA airline. What it is, most of the major airlines now contract with smaller airlines that fly those regional jets.
Right.
They fly under the colors of the big guys,
Yeah.
but they are a separate airline they're contracted. By the way, there are also Russian figure skaters on this aircraft as well.
Right.
The Associated Press named a couple of famous
Yeah.
Russian figure skaters that were on the aircraft. There was a figure skating event in Wichita, and these people were returning home or going to connect with flights in Reagan.
Yeah. These people, the Russians that Fred just mentioned, were a Russian skating couple and were apparently world champions in the 1990s at one point. Their names are Vadim Namov and Evgenia Shishkova.
Well, that's not bad, Chris. That Russian names can be tough.
Nobody here will argue with you.
No, I'm not arguing with you. All right, so now, Fred, now, of course, we're going to be finding out more details as time goes on and investigations can wrap up. But some people may be asking, well, why was a military helicopter doing training around D.C.? But the fact is, and I don't know that this was the reason, but the fact is our military over the last 20 years, because of our experiences in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and other places, we do conduct military exercises around cities.
Yes.
Because of insurgencies and so on and so forth. So I'm saying that could be the reason why they were around an airport or in a major metropolitan area.
It was a training flight, so they're at a very low level. So they're obviously doing some training. Perhaps it was based on training low level at night in congested areas.
Yeah.
So they were trying to give the pilots some experience on that.
And what you said is true about the lights too. Of course, I'm not a pilot. You were in the Canadian Air Force.
Trained there.
You trained there. So I do know that when I'm on a flight and we're going into a big city, I've been into Reagan and probably Dulles too in D.C., but any major city, the lower you get, the more your vision is cluttered by all those lights.
Yes.
And even I'm sure even experienced pilots can be affected by that. So
yeah, there's a saying in the aviation world, low and slow is very dangerous.
Yeah.
And when you're on approach like that, final approach, you're low and you're slow, which gives you absolutely no time to respond.
Yeah.
Even if there was an engine failure at that point, it can be disastrous because you're slow, you can't zoom up, and you're very low to the ground. So it's like I said, it was a combination of factors. I believe the investigation will show, and it sounds to me air traffic control did what it could. It sounds to me, obviously, with the American Airlines crew, they were simply on approach to a landing, and the military crew. That is the one question. What happened? Why didn't air traffic control get a response to that warning?
Right.
Maybe we'll find out.
All right. Anything else on this story, Chris?
As we speak, President Trump has finally come out to take the podium. I have no idea what he is saying, but he has just walked out there after the press briefing was announced just before the start of this program.
And it says 67 believed dead, so that is going to be the apparent death toll from this tragic accident. All right, Chris, let's move on to the next story.
We can. This may carry over for pretty much the rest of the show at some point, some way. But I do want to make our listeners and readers and fans of AFA and AFR aware of confirmation hearings. This is the season for confirmation hearings. And right now, the FBI director nominee, Kash Patel, is testifying before senators at a confirmation hearing. The other things that we need to look out for, and we're going to be reporting on throughout the day, Lord willing. Director of National Intelligence nominee Tulsi Gabbard is testifying at a confirmation hearing. And I saw earlier this morning on Fox News that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will be taking questions again from senators at another continuation of his confirmation hearings. Those were all the lead stories pretty much yesterday. And, the crash is going to be the lead story for the rest of the day. But the confirmation hearings are kind of a
Tulsi
second
Gabbard
story.
Also today?
Yes, Tulsi Gabbard is also today. And a number of people, I'll do this. A lot of people have, a lot of Democrats that have issues with Tulsi Gabbard, who, of course, was a Democrat before she changed parties after endorsing Donald Trump. A lot of people have raised questions about her patriotism because she has, quote-unquote, Russian ties or foreign allegiances or whatever it may be. Republican Senator Tom Cotton went on television to dismiss concerns about Gabbard's patriotism. Here he is on Fox, clip 4.
Unfortunately, I think they may. There's a lot of unfair accusations in the press. Hillary Clinton has even questioned her patriotism, called her an asset of a foreign country. I understand people that may have differences with Ms. Gabbard. She has a long voting record of 8 years in the House. We didn't vote together on a lot of issues, but I hope no one questions her patriotism, her integrity, her loyalty to our country. After all, she has served more than 20 years in our nation's uniform. She's undergone 5 background checks. I reviewed the latest one last week, more than 300 pages. It's clean as a whistle. It is perfectly fine and appropriate to probe and explore different policy views. No one should be questioning Tulsi Gabbard's patriotism.
Yeah. You know, Fred, I do remember when Hillary Clinton said she was a Russian asset.
Yeah.
And I know that Tulsi Gabbard fired back at that accusation. And this is a good point. That was Tom Cotton, you said? Mm-hmm. It's a good point that he's bringing up, that she's undergone a number of background checks. If she was a Russian asset, which is an absurd claim on its face, if you were to question anybody's commitment to Russia, it should be Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Because those are the first words out of her mouth when she has a political opponent.
Well, here's my point. Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
She sat in the House as a Democrat. So why didn't the Democrats express concern when she was a Democrat?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows the answer.
Yes. I watched some of the hearings with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. yesterday. And I listen, I'm not naive. I know that there's a lot of political gamesmanship that goes on. But the way he was treated by Democrats on the panel, Senator Warnock, especially of Georgia, I watched him and a couple more questioning him. I was disgusted by it. They just twisted his words, and it is, Chris, kind of like grand theater when it comes to these hearings. I think during our story meeting, you mentioned something about the fact that a lot of these members of the Senate on the Democratic side, since they're opposing Republican nominees, they just want sound clips.
They do.
They want to look like they're fighting the good fight, and it doesn't matter if they're dealing with the process with any kind of integrity.
Yeah. This is the resistance. They're hoping that their allies at MSNBC or CNN are going to run the sound bites, narrowed down sound bites of Elizabeth Warren hammering the desk and going after Robert F. Kennedy. What was interesting, we don't have time to play this clip. We can do it perhaps later. But at one point yesterday, Senator Bernie Sanders brought up the fact that a group that Kennedy used to be involved with was selling baby onesies for $26. $26. That's incredible. It's one of those things. So then I looked it up.
We have that clip, but I want us to play it at some point.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah. But I'll mention this briefly. So one of the things that Sanders took exception to was RFK dared be involved with a group selling baby onesies for $26.
All right, look, let's go. We're going to hold the break for just a little bit. Can you set up this clip?
Yes, and then I'll tag it out. This is Senator Bernie Sanders losing his mind over RFK and onesies that had a anti-vax, quote-unquote, message on them, and whether or not Kennedy stood by those remarks. Clip 6.
They are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unvaxxed, Unafraid. Next one, and they're sold for $26 a piece, by the way. Next one is No Vax, No Problem. Now, you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines. Can you tell us now that you will, now that you are pro-vaccine, that you're going to have your organization take these products off the market?
Senator, I have no power over that organization. I'm not part of it. I resigned from the board.
Yeah, that was just a few months ago. You founded that. You certainly have power. You can make that call. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with leadership.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
I am supportive of vaccines. I will. I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that product. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Down with the onesies.
Right. So as you may have taken away from the clip, he took exception to the fact that they had onesies for $26. I then looked at one of Bernie's campaign websites, and the Marxist is selling sweatshirts for $45 and T-shirts for $27. Do you support these prices, Bernie?
Yes, Bernie Sanders. You know, there's a real Richard Nixon feel to Bernie Sanders when he gets ramped up.
Yes.
Just his voice. I kept expecting him to say, "I am not a crook." Well, listen, I'm glad we played that because that does show some of the high-quality political discussions that were going on in these hearings. And you heard Bernie Sanders end it without giving Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the opportunity to end the discussion. Okay. He's for the onesies. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildmon.
Paul writes in the book of Romans, "For by the grace given to me, I bid every one among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment." Let me tell you a story. The young man walked into the service station. Seeing his friend who owned the station in the rear, he yelled out, "Hey, Sam, how's business?" And from the back of the station came the reply, "As usual." Sitting down next to the phone, the young man yelled out again, "Mind if I use your phone?" "No, go ahead and help yourself," came the reply. The young man picked up the phone directory, thumbed through his pages until he came to the correct page. Placing the directory next to the phone, he dialed the number. About that time, the owner of the station walked up and sat down next to him. "How you doing with that new boat and motor, Bob?" asked the owner. "Folks been telling me they've been seeing a whole lot of old Bob Smith out at the lake hauling in the big uns. Sure sounds like you're getting your money's worth out of it," Sam continued. Bob's party on the other end of the line had answered, and by that time he held up his hand, motioning for Sam to be quiet. As Bob started talking, Sam noticed that he was disguising his voice to keep from being recognized. Wondering what it was all about, Sam listened closely to the conversation. "Is this Woodruff's store?" asked Bob in the disguised voice. From the other end came the reply, "Yes, it is." "Could I speak to Mr. Woodruff?" Bob asked in the muffled tone. "This is Mr. Woodruff speaking," said the party on the other end. "Mr. Woodruff, I was wondering about a possible job with you. Several months ago, I saw an ad of yours in the paper where you said you needed someone to work there in your store as a salesman. I have some experience as a salesman, and I believe I could do you a top-notch job," Bob said as he continued to use the fake voice. "I'm sorry," Mr. Woodruff replied, "but the job has been filled for about 6 months now. A fellow by the name of Bob Smith contacted us, and we hired him right away." "Is that right?" Bob continued. "Sure hate that. Would have loved to have worked for you. Maybe this Bob Smith fellow isn't doing too well, and you could let him go and let me have that position," Bob asked while Sam stared at him with puzzlement. "No, I'm afraid I couldn't do that," Mr. Woodruff replied. "Bob Smith's doing us a real fine job. Fact about the business is that he's one of the best salesmen we've ever employed." "Well, I appreciate talking to you, Mr. Woodruff, and I may call you again in the future," Bob said as he hung up the phone. Now, Sam couldn't wait to ask the question. "What in the world were you doing? I thought you'd been working down at Woodruff's for about 6 months now," said Sam. "I have," said Bob. "Then why in the world did you call about a job and talk in an unnatural voice?" asked Sam. "Well, Sam," said Bob, "you might say I was just checking up on myself. You know, I guess that's something we all need to do pretty often."
This has been My Turn with Don Wildmon, a production of the American Family Association.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildmon, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, just returned from the presidential inauguration of President Trump and Vice President Vance. And let me tell you something, folks. There's an excitement in the air among millions and millions and millions of Americans who are ready for some common sense changes to come to our country. Guess what? We're going to Washington, D.C. again for our Spiritual Heritage Tour in June and September. We're over halfway full. If you want to go with us to see our nation's capital from a distinctively Christian heritage viewpoint, then you need to contact us. You need to go to wildmongroup.com, WILDMON group.com. We're also going to Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to Boston in October. For information on any of these tours, go to wildmongroup.com, WILDMON group.com.
Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. Psalm 139, 23 through 24.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
And welcome back. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildmon today. Joined in studio by Fred Jackson and Chris Woodward. And now we want to welcome back to the program Dr. Alex McFarland, host of Exploring the Word, heard weekdays at 3 p.m. Central Time here on American Family Radio. Alex, welcome back, brother.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you.
Alex, are you at home? Are you on the road? You travel a lot, speaking especially on college campuses. Where are you today?
Doing well, thanks. I'm at home, and so it's the acoustics are probably not as good as when I'm in the studio, but getting ready to head out, and got a busy month. We've got a big event in February in Wichita, Kansas, and a lot going on. A speaker series this summer that I'm hosting with Charlie Kirk and Dinesh D'Souza and Gary Chapman. And so, but the core of all that I do is every afternoon at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, which is a ministry Bert Harper and I call Exploring the Word.
Amen, amen. Well, listen, I don't know that I ever asked you this, but Tim may have. You have your own website with some of your own materials, your speaking schedule, things like that people can go to?
Yeah, thank you. It's just my name, alexmcfarland.com. And, we set it up about maybe 15 years ago just to post an article here and there. And then as Exploring the Word has really grown, and listen, Ed, I give God the glory.
Amen.
Bert Harper and I, we're on the air every day, but we talk on the phone and pray together a couple of times a week. And right now, the Exploring the Word, and this is one of the shows on the American Family Radio Network. We have 10,000 Facebook followers, Bert and I. And so my website has grown because my speaking tour, which is the never-ending tour, and then we do 7 summer youth camps now in Montana, upstate New York, Richmond, Virginia, Temple, Georgia, places like that.
Yeah.
So outside of the studio, we're just out there trying to evangelize the young Americans and not only bring kids to a relationship with Jesus, but really teach them what we call biblical worldview and biblical citizenship.
Amen. Well, speaking of young people, Chris, you have a story that we wanted to kind of toss to Alex and get his insights on it, and then wherever the conversation takes us, we'll go from there.
Yeah, this week, a new poll from something called the Dimitri Institute for Pro-Life Advancement found that most young people support limits on abortion. Matter of fact, if you want to get into the demographics here, most millennials and Gen Zers support limits on abortion. This, Alex, seems to fly in the face to what mainstream media wants us to believe, that being that young people are all pro-abortion.
Oh, yeah, this is so exciting. I was reading some of those stats from the Dimitri Institute, and there are a number of other, polling institutes that have, data that, concurs that, 2/3 of all young people, and this was a big swath of the population, 18 to 42, and with an accuracy rate of, plus or minus 2.5%. So this is really accurate. Bottom line is, 2/3 are what we would call pro-life, or they at least want some restrictions on abortion, and we could phrase it this way too. They do want legal protection for the unborn. And there, the March for Life, January 19th, Vice President Vance was there holding the sign, "We are the pro-life generation." Mm-hmm. So for those of us like AFA, and, my wife and I personally for decades now have really, waved the banner for the sacredness of human life. These are wonderful trends.
Alex, it's Fred here. Looking at these stats, what do you credit for this change of heart amongst young people? I mean, I'm sure it's not pro-life being promoted in the public school system or our universities. So what do you think is happening? What is getting at the hearts of these kids?
Well, I think it's a number of things, and what this is illustrative of is that in spite of rhetoric and ideology and indoctrination, truth rises to the top. And let me say, we live in an age of high-res ultrasounds. We just, for a couple of weeks, had a wonderful campaign with Preborn through AFR to encourage people to support ultrasounds for expectant mothers. But, when you've got a high-res image of a developing child, it's hard to argue that is not a human life. And young people, they're very savvy. They know that life begins at conception. Something else, though, that we see not only every summer, the 1,200 teenagers that we have in our camps and conferences, we do a lot of polling, and I've seen this for a decade, guys, and many studies concur with what I'm about to say, about what is called the desire for parenthood. See, a lot of young people, they might be high schoolers, but they're thinking about the future, and there is a desire for family. There's aspiration to find a spouse and get married and have children. And I think a lot of the, like the National Library of Medicine that documents there is this present and growing desire for parenthood among increasing numbers of young people. And I think at least a part of it is, well, for one thing, the desire for family, relationships, marriage. That's only natural. But the thing is, there's a desire for a family unit that vast numbers of these young people never had. They came from, fractured backgrounds. And so the cause not only for legal protection for the unborn, the defense of life, but ultimately the desire for marriage and family, it's growing. Because here's the thing, we have a lot of technological gadgets, and we're the wired up Wi-Fi generation, right?
Yeah.
But we're still human beings. And God made us for a relationship, and the most fundamental foundational relationship of all is the family.
Well, Alex, it's a very interesting discussion. And I love the fact that you're talking about, the power and impact of social media in possibly shifting some of the views of the most social media savvy, part of our culture. That's these young people. But as they develop this very natural God-ordained desire for not only community, but close fellowship with someone who will become their spouse, and then they get married, have a family, it's really important for the church to have a clear biblical answer to the questions that might cause to arise in these young people, because there's so many confusing messages out there about what marriage is and what it isn't, and are kids important? The church has to have a biblical viewpoint that it can clearly communicate to these young people, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And they are hungry for it. They really are. That's why I encourage parents, adult leaders, pastors, youth leaders, ministers of education. Look, from childhood up, in Sunday school, in the church, from the pulpit, teach biblical worldview. And by that, I mean the fully orbed panorama of what God says about life, salvation, maturity, stewardship, marriage one day, family. And let me just say this, even in conservative churches, because, guys, I've been around the block a little bit. I've been in so many places where people want to go out of their way to minister to the marginalized, and I get that. God bless the single mothers. We're rooting for you.
Right.
And people that have, unusual, if not very painful circumstances. But here's the thing: let's affirm and encourage the 98 plus percentile of people that will, get married and have children or help raise children and build families. And that doesn't mean that we're demonizing or pushing to the side the, non-traditional family structures. But let me say also, in that regard, pastors, I believe they need to call out sin, that homosexuality is a sin, transgenderism is a sin and a deviation. God's design is heterosexual monogamy, marriage between a man and a woman in a committed relationship for life. All sexual activity outside of marriage is wrong. And I see, like I say, even in conservative circles, so many, they want to bend over backwards not to offend anybody. And then the vast majority that want to live normal, godly, productive, biblical lives, we don't speak to that huge demographic and, appreciate and affirm those that want to do right. And, I think kids are very hungry for truth. I think they're very teachable. And, I tell them, like, I'll be in Wichita, Kansas next month to do a father-son event. And I tell young men, I say, look, the second greatest gift God will ever give you, second only to salvation, is a Christian wife. And you need to be praying about that now and thinking about not only finding a godly spouse, but young men, with every day, you're growing more into the man that will one day be a godly spouse. And so, guys, you all know that I love apologetics and biblical worldview, and I do, and we've been all about that for 30 years. But here's the thing: I'm more convinced than ever that if we win with the Christian family, we succeed in all areas. Folks, save the family and you'll save the nation, and contribute tangibly to the Great Commission.
Amen. That is an excellent point, and it is the core. By God's design, it is the core unit for building a healthy society. And so that's why we call this ministry American Family Association. Brother Don initially named it the National Federation for Decency. When he started off the ministry, the focus was what was on television. It broadened a little bit to include pornography that was being sold at convenience stores, even to people under 18. But as Brother Don moved on and started dealing with more and more issues, he realized those two things were symptoms of a broader war against the family. And as you pointed out, Alex, that is the most important unit, the building block, as it were, of human society. So, Alex, we're going to have to put a caboose on the discussion at that point. What do you and Bert have cooking for exploring the Word for the remainder of the week?
Well, thanks, Ed. We are now in the book of Exodus, which it was just the providence of God. We started Exodus on Monday, which was the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. But in 15 years, Bert and I have taught through every book of the Bible probably about 3 times.
Wow.
And we, up to Christmas and the first of the year, we were wrapping up the book of Ephesians, and we had spent several months in the New Testament. So now we're in the book of Exodus, chapter 3. And again, on the American Family Radio Network, 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, and throughout the USA. And we take calls and questions, and we just have a good time looking at the scriptures every afternoon live on AFR.
Well, Alex, thank you for being on with us, brother. You always bring such a clear and biblical perspective on the issues that we discuss with you on this program, and we look forward to what you and Bert have going on this afternoon.
Well, be encouraged, folks. God is at work in the lives of young people.
Amen. Amen. Love to hear that. Fred, thank you, Alex.
Yeah, very interesting. We asked Alex the question, okay, why this switch amongst young people becoming more pro-life? And he says the surveys show that a lot of young people have been through a very rough family life. Mm-hmm. They've had exposure to the results of sin.
Yeah.
In those and so they desire. And I think there is a revolution driven by reality going on in this country right now.
Amen. Not just this issue either.
Not just this issue. Politically, I think God in his sovereignty allowed Joe Biden to win the 2020 election so people could see.
Yes.
People were warned about the policies of a Biden presidency. And Biden even told us, I'm going to invite a surge at the border.
Right.
And people
He didn't hide it.
What's he talking about, a surge at the border? Well, we saw the results of it.
Yes.
Over 10 million people invaded our country and the crime that came with it. Mm-hmm. And so we saw the reality. We saw the reality of a Justice Department weaponized against political enemies.
Yes.
Political enemies that included moms showing up at school board meetings to express concern about transgenderism, about pro-life people being thrown in jail for praying outside of an abortion clinic. We warned people about that, but they said, no, that never happened in America.
Right.
But for the last 4 years, they saw it. And I believe we saw the big switch in November because people were able to see the reality of what the Biden administration, the Democratic Party, the left stands for. And they said, we don't want this. So it's a revolution driven by the reality of what happens when you allow a left-wing agenda to be given power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And to me, that's the only real explanation for the 54% approval rating for Donald Trump. I'm not making a comment about Donald Trump himself. I'm just saying, generally speaking, a second term does not have the kinds of approval ratings that you had in your first term. There's usually a drop-off, and yet he's higher than he was in his first term. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about. People are relieved that Trump was elected, and it's not really even partisan. It's ideological.
Yes.
This is not just a rejection of the Democratic Party per se and an acceptance of everything the Republican Party stands for. It is a rejection of the craziness that resulted from the ideology that infected the Biden administration and has threatened to take over the Democratic Party. It's excellent insight there.
Well, and I think one other example, the anti-Semitism that we saw on our university campuses in the wake of the massacre of more than 1,200 Israeli men, women, and children.
Yes, on October 7th.
Yeah, within 48 hours after that massacre, we had people on our streets and on our campuses saying, way to go, Hamas.
Yeah, and you had stories of Jewish students who were afraid to go to class. You had one college, I don't remember if it was Columbia or what, said if you're Jewish, you might not want to go to class.
You might want to try to hide it.
Yes, hide it.
Yeah.
That's frightening to people
Mm-hmm.
for them to see this kinds of things. And it very well could be, I don't know whether it's going to be a permanent political shift or not. Nobody knows that right now. But for the time being, it is a pretty substantial shift in the way people are viewing these kinds of ideological issues.
And other than the left, people are cheering what the Trump administration is doing with these illegal immigrants. You're not hearing a lot of complaints about them being round up, put on planes, and sent home.
I've been looking at the comments. Now that's kind of hit or miss when you look at comments under a story, whether it's on social media or at a particular website. I've just been interested to see, and I fully expected on some of these stories to see people complaining about it, but you don't see much of that at all. There are a lot of people saying, listen, all these people in my city were creating chaos, accidents, because some of these illegals didn't know how to drive, but the resources that were being sucked up to transition illegal immigrants into these communities, a lot of people are still resentful about that, and I do not see the kind of complaints that I kind of expected to see.
Nope.
So some of that may change as time goes on, but for the time being, it seems like a lot of people in this country, the vast majority, don't want people, even in the Hispanic community, don't want people coming in here illegally and overturning the process by which many of them came into this country legally.
Well, we were talking with Alex a minute ago about life and salvation, and then you guys talked about crimes committed by illegal immigrants. All of that factors into what I'm about to play here. It's a short clip. But yesterday, President Trump signed the Laken Riley Act into law. It was the first bill he's signed into law since he returned to the White House. The mother of Laken Riley was there, and she thanked President Trump for signing the bill into law, but also listens to who she goes on to give credit or a shout-out for. Clip 12.
He's a man of his word. We trust that he will fight for the American people. Most importantly, I want to thank our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because without his sacrifices, Laken's story would have ended on that horrific day that she was taken from us. But because of him, we can continue living knowing that we will see Laken again.
That was the holiest moment on national television yesterday at about 2:45, 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And this is explained for some people tuning in.
Yes.
Laken Riley was a nursing student. Go ahead.
Right.
Explain why this is important.
Yeah, Laken Riley was a college student. She was murdered by a man authorities have identified as Jose Ibarra. He was arrested and convicted of that last year. In response to this and to strengthen our laws to make sure there's not another Laken Riley
He was
out
a
there.
Venezuelan illegal immigrant.
Yes, he was here illegally. And in response to that, to try to prevent this from happening again, Senator Katie Britt of Alabama came up with a bill called the Laken Riley Act, and it would require police authorities, law enforcement authorities, to detain illegal immigrants that were arrested for things like theft and crimes in general. It would also allow state attorneys general to sue the Department of Homeland Security if the secretary was not enforcing immigration law. That bill went quickly through the House and the Senate. It did get some bipartisan support, not much, but it did get bipartisan support. And yesterday, President Trump, as he promised, did sign that into law. It was a huge event. He came out and spoke. He said government was supposed to protect people like Laken Riley. Our government will protect people like Laken Riley.
And Fred, I do like what Laken Riley's mom said. I love it. Okay. Now, first of all, every parent hopes and prays, if they're a Christian parent, not even just Christians, but you don't want to ever outlive your kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have no idea what it's like to be going through what she and the rest of the family are going through. But what a testimony of the fact that Jesus does give you hope to see your loved ones.
Yeah. A brokenhearted mom.
Right.
But a brokenhearted mom who has an eternal perspective.
Yeah.
Because of what Jesus Christ can do.
Amen.
And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And as Chris said, to a nationwide audience, to give credit to Jesus Christ, she said, we will see Laken again.
Yes.
And that is the hope of Christians.
That's right. That is the hope.
Eternity begins when you accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. It ain't the end. It's just the beginning.
Amen. Amen. And I listen, tip of the hat to the Democrats who joined. I don't know who would not be in favor of a bill like this.
Yeah.
All right, 5-minute break for news. When we come back, Steve Jordahl will join us as we look at the events here and abroad that affect you and our country.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
You're aware of how important it is to stay engaged in America's culture war. One way American Family Association helps you to do that is through action alerts. Here's how it works. Once or twice a week, we'll email you about matters critical to America's families, and we'll offer ways to take action. Visit afa.net today and tap the Action Alert sign-up button.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
Family News, almost DP.
On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come.
All passengers are feared dead after American Eagle Flight 5342, carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members, collided midair with an Army helicopter near Reagan Washington National Airport last night. Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon with more.
Defense Secretary Hegseth said that this was a required annual proficiency training flight. The Army pilots are required to do an annual night evaluation. Family notifications have begun, we're told. We began speaking with Army officials shortly after the crash. That's when we learned that an Army Black Hawk helicopter was involved in the crash and 3 soldiers were on board. They were on a training mission. Officials say there was no sign of terrorism or criminality. Officials say one of the soldiers on board the military helicopter has been recovered.
President Trump's pick to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, appearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee for his confirmation hearing. The nominee states he would serve as an unbiased FBI director.
If confirmed as the next FBI director, I will remain focused on the FBI's core mission. That is to investigate fully wherever there is a constitutional factual basis to do so.
President Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, facing questions from senators at her confirmation hearing. Gabbard criticized the intelligence, suggesting that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction in 2003, which was used as justification for a U.S. invasion.
For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence.
Parts of hurricane-ravaged North Carolina are now dealing with wildfires. Jeff Manasso with more.
At least 3 wildfires have ignited in McDowell County in western North Carolina, near towns that were devastated by Hurricane Helene. One fire that's burned about 250 acres. That's now 55% contained.
I'm very depressed, very anxious, It's just been so much.
This woman, one of many who were under evacuation orders for the second time in a year. The good news, for now, evac orders have been lifted, with emergency crews making significant progress overnight in battling the North Carolina wildfires as winds diminish and relative humidity increases. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
It's heads I win, tails you lose for New Jersey state troopers who are being investigated for not doing enough to stop an increase in traffic accidents in the Garden State. But Steve Jordahl reports the cops' hands are tied when it comes to fixing the problem.
The New Jersey Attorney General's office put the state police under investigation after looking at traffic stops around the state and finding that more black motorists were stopped than white drivers between 2009 and 2021. Randy Sutton says the logical solution was to make fewer traffic stops.
If you make a stop, you're going to get in trouble. If you don't make a stop, you're not going to get in trouble because you can't get in trouble
for the stops you don't make, right? Well, wrong.
That's because when the troopers stopped enforcing traffic laws, there was an 18% increase in accidents, including fatal wrecks. So now New Jersey state troopers are facing a special counsel investigation into that.
New Jersey governor, the attorney general have basically declared war on the cops for actually doing their jobs. And now they're going to be punished for the results of actions taken by the leadership of the state of New Jersey.
Sutton says it's exactly what you might expect from a state that's been on the defund the police bandwagon and has had the police in its crosshairs for years.
The government there, the governor, the state, they have waged war against New Jersey State Police for 20 years.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Most U.S. stocks are ticking higher following a rush of profit reports from some of the country's most influential companies. More news online at afn.net and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty P.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back, everybody. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildmon today. I'm joined by Fred Jackson. Chris Woodward has gone back to his office to continue to scout for news, and so Steve Jordahl.
I think he's playing solitaire.
You think he's playing solitaire? Does anybody play solitaire anymore on their computer? I mean,
my wife does, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many games that have come out
He
since
works
the
very
solitaire
hard.
days.
He works very hard.
Yeah. No, he does. All our staff at American Family News do a great job, including you, Steve.
Well, thank you.
So, anyway, Steve Paisley Jordahl is actually decked out in Paisley
I do
today.
have it on today. You got to rep every so often, right?
Yeah, you got to do it. All right, what's I don't know why I keep using what's cooking. So maybe I'm just hungry.
Maybe that's it, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I've been keeping an eye on the Kash Patel hearings. He's in line to become the director of the FBI, and there was expected to be some fireworks in his confirmation. And indeed, there were. The tack that the Democrats are taking is that he's conspiracy theorist, that he doesn't have the right experience, that he's been on podcasts and said things that are crazy and everything. And so he at one point just got a little bit tired of it all. And this is what he said, cut 15.
If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
All right, then.
Oh. Feisty.
Yeah.
Yes. Feisty. Now, who knows how to calculate the amount of experience that someone has and how that translates into a prestigious and important position like Kash Patel has been nominated for. But he was senior director of the counterterrorism director at the U.S. National Security Council, former federal prosecutor at the U.S. Department of Justice. It seems to me, Fred, that a lot of this is political theater. At the same time, Democrats are pretty stubborn about trying to mischaracterize people that President Trump has put forward because they can't stand President Trump.
Yeah, that's it. And we're getting the tactics at these hearings are fairly common. They will dig up partial quotes.
Right.
They did that with Kash Patel this morning.
And they did that with RFK Jr. yesterday.
And they don't allow, in this case, Kash Patel to say, wait a minute, you're taking me out of context. They'll say, it's my time.
Yes.
it's my time. I don't have time to hear your response.
Technically, these senators don't have to ask questions.
No.
They can use their whole time mischaracterizing someone.
Yes.
So it makes a great sound clip. But I've seen that. We've all seen that. If you watched hearings over the years, that's common.
Yeah. Trump's Supreme Court nominees that were showing up, a Democrat would say, quote something partial that they said somewhere along the way. And, of course, was it with Kavanaugh? All the, here's something from your yearbook.
Yes.
Remember all of that we went through?
That's right.
So it's Democrats, we got some dirt on you. Here it is. But, no, I don't want to hear from you.
I think it was Amy Klobuchar this morning who said to him, I don't have time for your answers. I've got only a limited amount of time. To which he looks up at her and says, well, have at it. And then he just sits back.
And I'm sure that the Trump administration, the people who are prepping the nominees, have drilled it into them. You've got to try to remain calm. And I consider Kash Patel's rebuttal there to be calm.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
but they're told, listen, they are going to try to push you into some sort of outburst that makes you look like a wild-eyed crazy, because that will be what's played by the mainstream media.
I thought Pam Bondi did a great job during her hearings.
She was unbreakable.
Yes, she was very strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else going on with Kash Patel? That is going on just today. Is that the expectation?
I don't know if he's coming. I know that JFK's back for a second day in
RFK.
front of a different. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. JFK's in front of a different panel. RFK is in front of a second panel. It's a different committee today, I think.
That oversees Health and Human Services.
Yes.
So I don't know what the schedule is for Kash. I should have looked, but I didn't.
All right. And then also Tulsi Gabbard is scheduled today, or is that tomorrow?
She's
on right now.
She's in a different committee.
All right. So it's 3 hearings going on simultaneously?
Two for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And these things in terms of voting, these, first of all, have to be voted out of committee. So you have to have – there are a majority of members from the president's political party, right? So there'll be a majority of Republicans on these committees, but they're not always Republicans who are supportive. Sometimes it depends on who's got the position.
The Pete Hegseth was the case.
Yeah.
And when it went to the full Senate vote, there were 3 Republicans who voted against Hegseth.
Including Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. And that's why Vice President J.D. Vance had to come in and do the deciding vote.
Break the 50-50 tie.
Yeah.
So these will have to get voted out of committee is what I'm saying.
Yep.
And if they are voted out, and by voted out, I mean approved, and these are always narrow, majorities.
They're generally going, in the committee, they're generally going along party lines.
Yeah. And then it will go to the full Senate. And then, like Fred said, anything can happen.
Yeah. They have, to this point, they have lined up their ducks in a row to the point where I'm pretty sure they know what's going to happen when these people get to the floor.
Yeah.
They've whipped the votes, so they know. So it's not as much of an unknown or a risk as you might think.
And there's no bombshells, right, Steve? I mean, these things, for the most part, these individuals have been vetted. Both sides of the political aisle know the quotes that are going to be mentioned. Like I was talking about RFK Jr.'s, his hearing yesterday, partial quotes being thrown at him, and then, the Democrats saying, I know that you're in favor of this, and you're in favor of that, and you're despicable, and all those kinds of things. So there's no real surprises that usually come out at these hearings.
They say the internet is forever, but there's only so much that a guy can post on the internet. So it's not hard to find his social media accounts and go back 5-6 years or more and just take a look at them all. They've got a lot of people to do this, to watch every appearance he's had on a talk show or a podcast. It's work, but it's not certainly insurmountable work, and everybody can do it. So there is nothing that they can bring out, I don't think.
All right.
And that's why, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
stop the flow there. But that's why they had to bring on, like in the Kavanaugh hearing, something completely made up at the end that didn't exist because everybody had Brett Kavanaugh's social media life, his life to public life,
his rulings, his writings,
everything. He was pretty public, so they had to find something that nobody knew about. Well, because it didn't happen. So that's the only way.
That was initiated by someone's letter.
A woman's
letter that was written.
Yeah, to Feinstein, I think. Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Anyway.
All right. What else?
We're still hearing a little bit about this tragedy on the Potomac. I'm hearing now that, first of all, it was a Black Hawk helicopter.
Okay.
And they are meant to be stealthy. I mean, they're built so that they're hard to see, especially at night. And the helicopter might have been flying dark or without lights on, as in undercover.
Which would explain why they had the night vision goggles. Fred mentioned that.
Which would have, so close to the ground, like just exactly what Fred said. But yeah, tragedy. We're hearing from. There was a guy that couldn't get on the plane because his dog.
Yeah, that was in Wichita.
Yeah,
his dog was too big, and so he drove. Instead, but he would have been on that flight.
Yeah,
and we talked about the fact that these kinds of tragedies, there are always stories like that.
Do you remember there was a plane that crashed into the Potomac back in the 80s or so, when there was a guy that went in the river. Lenny?
Was it ValueJet?
I don't remember what jet it was. I just remember, I think the name Lenny was the guy that waded into the water and started pulling survivors out. This is ice water. This is in the middle of winter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think he was up on the bridge.
Yeah.
And he dove in.
Oh, my goodness.
To start saving people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, back in the 80s. I remember the movie with Tom Hanks called Sully, but that was about the pilot.
That was in Manhattan.
Yeah, and that goes to your point you made earlier in the program, Fred, that at low altitude, you don't have much time to figure out what you're going to do.
No, and the movie portrayed that very well. You know, he took off from LaGuardia.
Yeah.
And he was heading south and hit the birds.
Yeah, bird strike.
And they kept saying, well, you know, there's an airport over here in Jersey.
Yeah.
He said, no, I can't.
Right.
We're going in to the river.
Split second.
And he did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Just incredible. Both of them, pilot and the co-pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't let inexperienced people fly these planes. They're expensive planes, and there are a lot of lives involved. So, surgeons, you never get the first time. That's the first time I've ever been in a plane like this, but I'm going to fly it.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. You see these movies. I don't fly. I don't fly planes. I'm not a pilot is what I mean. I do fly on planes, but that's why I always think, Fred, when you see some movie where they pull someone out of economy and say, okay, we're going to talk you through it. That's not reality. That's just Hollywood, right?
And for the most part, especially the passenger planes. But there have been incidents, even in recent years, where some guy's a passenger. I'm talking about twin-engine plane, small twin-engine plane, and the pilot has passed out. This guy gets on the radio to my pilot has passed out. I don't have any experience. I need help.
Yeah.
Now, with a smaller plane, so it's happened.
Okay, smaller planes only?
Smaller planes. Oh, no, not the big stuff.
Yeah.
The big stuff gets complicated.
Yeah.
But the smaller planes, it's pretty well aim for the runway.
Yeah.
Pull the throttle back and slow right over the runway. You'll be okay.
Wow. And I wouldn't want it either
I would
way.
imagine, Fred, before they put a pilot in something like an airline, a passenger liner, that he's got thousands of hours on a simulator. Then he's got time shadowing from the third seat in the cockpit.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's a co-pilot maybe for
years. Co-pilot.
Well, I follow the Tim Wildmon principle on getting on small planes.
No.
It's got to have at least two engines and two pilots.
That's right.
Because Tim doesn't want to be the one who has to try to land the plane if something happens to a single pilot.
J.J. Jasper, I think, has invited Tim up a couple of times. Ain't no way.
He says no. I say the same thing now. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago Tim said that, and I thought, that is a really good way to live your life. Two engines and two pilots.
That's right.
So, by the way, folks, we got a little sidetracked.
What are the odds?
We're certainly not laughing about the tragedy that's happened in D.C., but just general flight fears. Let's put it that way. All right, go ahead.
Well, they are deporting people now, and they've got, apparently there's millions that they want to deport. And in some cases, the countries are taking them back. In some cases, these are hardened criminals that if you deport them and send them back to their country of origin, the family of the person that this man or woman might have murdered, they don't want him just taken back to Colombia and set free. I just chose that country at random, but they want him to pay. So where are they going to put them all? Well, Donald Trump has an answer. Donald Trump is going to send them to Hotel Gitmo.
You mean these ones that are sure enough criminals?
Well,
or just any.
They can hold up to 30,000 illegal immigrants
at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba.
Yeah. So
is this temporary or permanent? This is just while you're awaiting an opening in Colombia or Venezuela.
That I haven't been able to figure that part out yet. But yeah, he's going to open up the.
I had no idea that they had that kind of capacity at Gitmo.
Huge.
Wow. Listen, I know Tim's of the mindset that if they committed crimes in this country, they should be in a prison here.
Yeah. Well, and this is probably as good. This is where they held the terrorists from 9/11.
I'm of the mindset that just get rid of them, send them back. If we lock down our border, they're not coming back. But let the countries of origin deal with them. I don't want taxpayers' money going. But anyway, people's opinions are all over the map on that.
Well, whenever I hear Gitmo, I hear, you can't handle the truth.
Well, it's A Few Good Men.
That is probably the best scene ever put on film, I think.
Well, at least in terms of a courtroom scene. That is a brilliant scene. We're talking about the folks, the Tom Cruise movie, A Few Good Men, along with
Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. You can't. I'll spare our listeners.
Started out pretty good though.
Oh, it's not bad. Hey, before we go, I know you got a list of stories. I want to get to President Trump talking about getting back to work.
Yeah.
If you're in the federal workforce, because then Fred has a story that I want to.
So, yeah, one of the executive orders, one of the things that the president said, I think we might have mentioned this yesterday, is that workers have about 15 or 16 days to decide if they're going to stay with the federal government and come back and occupy a chair in the federal building, or whether they want to retire. Offering them a very generous severance package of like 8 months of full benefits and, go at it. And so this is what President Trump had to say, cut 14.
If they don't agree by February 6th to show up back to work in their office, they will be terminated, and we will therefore be downscaling our government, which is something that the last 10 presidents have tried very hard to do but failed. Most of the people we're talking about have not been going to their federal offices in many, many years, from even before COVID. But they have nevertheless been paid. Some have worked, some haven't worked, and most of the studies say that some have just gone through the motions. We may ask these people to prove that they didn't have another job during their so-called employment with the United States of America, because if they did, that would be unlawful, as you understand.
Okay, now Fred, tell the story. This is from Dana Perino, I think.
Yeah, the show called The Five on Fox.
Right.
And she's one of the co-hosts on there, Dana Perino. And they were talking about this yesterday. And she told the story, I think it goes this way, that she has a friend who's a supervisor of a federal agency. So this friend has been going into the office, but she can tell when people log into the computers from home.
Right.
So one day there was this incident where this person had logged in from home. So to signal that, hey, I'm here, I'm working.
Yes.
So this friend of Dana Perino, supervisor, goes to lunch. And she happens to go to a Macy's department store.
Right.
And the worker, who is allegedly working from home, is working at the cosmetics department at Macy's.
She's double dipping.
She's double dipping, which goes to what Donald Trump was just saying there. Apparently, that is a federal crime. You're collecting a paycheck from the federal government, but you're working somewhere else.
Supposed to be working from home.
So one has to wonder how many of the Dana Perino stories are out there, because you have people who have been working from their homes. Now, these are people who live within a certain circumference of downtown D.C. since COVID. So we're talking years.
Yeah.
This has been going on. So what Donald Trump is doing, you got until next Thursday.
Yeah.
You come into work, because we reported yesterday, right now only 6% of the federal workforce is coming to work in the offices.
That's just crazy to me. And one of the things, Steve, that Donald Trump said when he was doing this with the press, making this announcement, is he said the American people are out there working. They have to go to their jobs,
yes,
and then they pay their taxes, and we pay federal workers who stay home.
You got to think that they're kind of skating on thin ice anyway, because they're going to be taxed on their government salary, and then they're going to be taxed on the Macy's fragrance counter in this case. Someone, not that hard to figure out, they're getting two incomes, full-time jobs. So there's a way to maybe they just think, and maybe it would have just flown under the radar there. But yeah.
Well, Dana Perino's friend's employee not flying under the radar. So
no.
All right, I wanted to get that in because this story is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
I know that Elon Musk, he was one of the ones who said for his employees, no, you got to come back to work.
Yeah.
In the office.
That's right.
So
you got to be here. And so we're going to find out. This is not too far off. It's next Thursday.
February 6th, right?
They've got to respond
to
the offer. 8 months.
It's an excellent offer. If they're if they've got other jobs, they could basically take their severance for 8 months.
Yeah.
And as a kickoff to a new career. So
yeah.
hopefully that will result in emptying out some of these federal office buildings. So
we told
or filling them up.
Yeah.
Or filling them up.
We told you yesterday that the Catholic Charities was put out a film telling immigrants, illegals, how to avoid ICE and how to make ICE's life and mission difficult.
Right.
Well, I think I'm almost positive that Secretary Kristi Noem was listening because she had this announcement last night, Cut 13.
Today, we are announcing that we have stopped all grant funding that's being abused by NGOs to facilitate illegal immigration into this country. So it's amazing to me the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent by the federal government that has been sent to NGOs to facilitate this invasion of our country. So I've taken action to stop those funds, to reevaluate them, and to make sure that we're actually using the taxpayer dollars in a way that strengthens this country, that keeps us safe.
Secretary Noem, if you're listening again today, thank you.
Yes. So, Kristi Noem recently confirmed as Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, NGOs means non-governmental organizations, correct?
Yes.
All right. So most people think of those as being at the United Nations, but Catholic Charities would also be one. So this is a problem, Fred, I know we're coming up towards the end of the program here, but of federal money going to organizations that technically are not under the auspices of federal government oversight. There has to be a way to make sure the monies are spent for the correct purposes. And in this case, it goes against the wishes of the administration when it comes.
Yeah, some of these NGOs get, and I'm not sure the exact figure, but I think it's around $10,000, $15,000 per head.
Yeah.
So that's what they're being paid.
It was nearly $3 billion that Catholic Charities nationally got in the last 4 years.
Yeah, it was a moneymaker for these organizations.
And they get more money the more illegals they help.
Oh, absolutely.
So they are incentivized to increase the traffic.
They have a conflict of interest in it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, what you got? Anything we can finish the show?
We do need to check in with our favorite fake news site, the Babylon Bee, who is reporting that senators have paused the next round of RFK hearing questions to announce that this next round of questions is brought to you by Pfizer.
This is a bizarre. I know that's funny. The Babylon Bee, and by the way, same outfit produces Not the Bee, which are serious stories that sound so outlandish
they should be in the
Bee. They should be in the Bee.
Right.
But this is a bizarre setup. There is so much money that goes from pharmaceuticals to members of both political parties, okay, and money that goes from these pharmaceutical companies to help fund like the CDC and some of these other organizations that are in charge of oversight. I got to tell you, I would be very interested. I don't agree with everything that RFK Jr. says and believes, but I'd be very interested to see what he digs up in this kind of weird relationship with these pharmaceuticals. So, all right, folks, that is all the time we have for today's edition of Today's Issues. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Trivia Friday, but more great programming directly ahead on American Family Radio. Bye for now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildmon, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, just returned from the president